The night air above Guam hung heavy with the scent of cigars and the hum of anticipation. March 8, 1945. In the hushed tension of the 21st Bomber Command headquarters, Major General Curtis LeMay, a figure already legendary for his unyielding resolve, bent over plotting tables. His gaze, sharp and analytical, swept across reconnaissance photographs of Tokyo, a city unlike any other target America had faced. This wasn't the industrial behemoth of German factories, easily pinpointed and pounded into submission. This was a sprawling, intricate web, a war machine woven into the very fabric of civilian life. A challenge that demanded not just a new strategy, but a fundamental reimagining of warfare itself. Imagine a city where aircraft parts were forged not in vast assembly lines, but in backyard machine shops. Precision instruments crafted not in sterile, dedicated facilities, but in converted temples. Tens of thousands of small workshops, each employing fewer than 30 workers, scattered like seeds throughout densely packed residential neighborhoods, their wooden and paper structures forming an unassuming, yet undeniably lethal industrial tapestry. This was the decentralized genius, or perhaps the desperate improvisation, of Japan's wartime economy. A system designed to be resilient, to absorb blows, and to defy conventional targeting. LeMay knew, with a chilling clarity, that the rules of engagement were about to be rewritten. The intelligence reports were unequivocal. Tokyo's war output, over 50% of it, flowed from these cottage workshops. Mitsubishi Aircraft alone relied on more than 300 such suppliers, hidden in plain sight across the metropolitan sprawl. The stakes were impossibly high. The Pacific War had been a brutal, drawn-out grind, marked by fierce resistance and staggering casualties. America was preparing for a full-scale invasion of the Japanese home islands, Operation Downfall, an undertaking projected to cost 1 million American lives and potentially tens of millions of Japanese. The B-29 Superfortress, a marvel of engineering and the most expensive weapons program of World War II, costing $3.7 billion, more than the Manhattan Project, had, thus far, failed to deliver the decisive blow that its proponents had promised. The pressure on LeMay, and indeed on the entire Army Air Forces, was immense. The very existence of an independent Air Force hung in the balance. The problem wasn't the B-29 itself. Each of these magnificent machines was a leviathan of the skies, displacing 20 tons empty, powered by 4 Wright R-350 duplex Cyclone radial engines, each churning out 200 horsepower. They could fly higher, faster, and farther than any bomber in history. But over Japan, these advantages were nullified by an unforgiving reality. High-altitude precision bombing, which had wreaked havoc on German facilities, achieved hit rates of less than 5%. The culprit? A newly discovered phenomenon, the jet stream, a powerful current of air at high altitudes that could exceed 250 miles per hour, scattering bombs miles from their intended aim points. Compounding this, Japan's notorious weather, characterized by persistent cloud cover, frequently obscured targets, rendering visual bombing runs almost impossible. Captain Robert McNamara, a brilliant, Harvard-educated mind serving in the Army Air Force's Office of Statistical Control, had meticulously studied these grim statistics. For McNamara, war was a complex equation, a matter of operational research and efficiency analysis. He understood that strategic bombing boiled down to calculations. Tons of ordnance delivered per sortie, target elimination percentages, Cost per square mile of manufacturing capability neutralized. The difference between victory and stalemate, he knew, often hinged on payload efficiency and the methodology of target selection. The current approach, he concluded, was an exercise in futility. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Control Officer Ginjiro Fujiwara of the Japanese Planning Committee reviewed his own manufacturing dispersal reports. Following the Doolittle Raid of 1942, Japanese authorities had deliberately ordered critical war assembly operations to be scattered throughout urban areas. Engine components were fabricated in Asakusa, electrical systems in Fukagawa, ball bearings in Sumida Ward. Hundreds of small workshops, intricately integrated into residential neighborhoods, were designed precisely to avoid concentrated bombing attacks. This strategy had worked against the B-29s flying at 30,000 feet, which struggled to hit even large factory complexes. Yet, Fujiwara harbored a profound dread. Tokyo had burned before, most notably during the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923, a catastrophe that had revealed the city's terrifying vulnerability to conflagration. Now, with American bombers almost daily overhead, that nightmare scenario was becoming terrifyingly probable. The conventional wisdom of strategic defense, designed to diffuse the impact of explosive bombs, was about to confront an entirely different kind of terror. The American strategic bombing campaign had, through February 1945, achieved minimal results. Since November 1944, the 21st Bomber Command had flown 22 missions against Japanese targets, and the outcomes were catastrophically poor. The Nakajima aircraft engine plant at Musashino, attacked 7 times, had sustained less than 4% damage. General Henry Hap Arnold, the commanding general of the Army Air Forces, had staked his reputation and the very future of an independent Air Force on the B-29 program. Political pressure mounted daily. Congress questioned the billions spent on these superfortresses that couldn't hit their targets. The Navy argued that carrier aviation was far more effective. The Army, grimly preparing for invasion, remained convinced that air power alone could never force Japanese surrender. Intelligence officer Lieutenant Colonel Robert Olds' target analyses revealed the fundamental problem. Japanese weather, specifically the unrelenting cloud cover, and the newly discovered jet stream, which scattered bombs miles from their aim points. Japanese fighter interceptors had also learned to exploit the B-29's vulnerable moments during bomb runs, leading to unsustainable loss rates approaching 6% per mission. A radical change was not merely advisable, it was absolutely essential, and LeMay was the man to implement it. His tactical revolution, conceived in a moment of desperate brilliance, was breathtaking in its audacity. He reversed almost every tenet of strategic bombing. Instead of day attacks, he ordered night raids. Instead of high altitude, he mandated low altitude, between 5,000 and 9,000 feet. A dangerously vulnerable range for bombers but below the jet stream. And, most crucially, instead of high explosives, he chose incendiary clusters. To maximize payload, the B-29s were stripped of all defensive armament except for the tail guns. Ammunition was removed, armor plating pulled out. Every pound of weight saved was converted into additional incendiary bomb load. This wasn't just a change in tactics. It was a complete inversion of strategic bombing doctrine, a gamble of monumental proportions. Weather forecasts for the night of March 9th indicated ideal conditions for this terrifying new strategy. Surface winds of 28 miles per hour, perfect for fanning flames across target districts, low humidity, which would accelerate fire spread, and clear skies that would provide excellent visibility for Pathfinder aircraft. The calculations, though cold and detached, were devastatingly precise. Each B-29 would carry 40 clusters of M69 incendiary bombs, each cluster containing 38 individual bomblets filled with napalm gel. The temperature at ignition would exceed 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, with a burning time of approximately 6 minutes per bomblet. The total incendiary load per aircraft was 6 tons. Multiply that by the 334 bombers launched, and the equation yielded 1,665 tons of incendiaries to be dropped on an area of approximately 12 square miles. This was not just about destroying factories. It was about incinerating the ecosystem that sustained them. Tokyo's fire defenses, built for an older, less apocalyptic kind of warfare, were catastrophically inadequate. A mere 8,000 firefighters for a city of 7 million people. 3 ladder trucks capable of reaching above 2 stories. No pressurized water system in most residential districts. Narrow streets, often just inches apart, would trap evacuating civilians. Wooden buildings, separated by mere inches rather than feet, were an invitation to widespread conflagration. Air raid shelters were virtually non-existent, largely because the government, in a tragic miscalculation, believed their construction would damage morale by suggesting Tokyo could actually be bombed. The stage was set for an inferno of unimaginable scale. At 17:35 on March 9th, the first B-29 lifted off from North Field, Guam. Hours later, at EO-08 on March 10th, the Pathfinder aircraft arrived over Tokyo. Using radar navigation, they identified the aiming point in the Shitamachi district, the city's most densely populated area. The lead Pathfinders dropped their incendiaries in parallel lines, creating a flaming X, a macabre beacon visible from 50 miles away. Following bombers would simply aim for this burning cross, dropping their loads to expand the conflagration outward, systematically engulfing the city. Squadron after squadron arrived over Tokyo in a relentless 3-hour procession. 278 B-29s reached the target area, their payloads unleashing a hellish rain upon the unsuspecting city. The inferno spread exactly as operational research had predicted. Individual fires merged into area conflagration. Area conflagration escalated into a firestorm. Temperatures at ground level exceeded an unimaginable 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Superheated air rose with such violence that it created tornado-force winds at ground level, sucking oxygen from shelters and feeding fresh air to the insatiable flames. By 2 a.m. on March 10th, 16 square miles of Tokyo were burning. The scenes on the ground defy comprehension. Police reports compiled in the chilling light of the aftermath described canals boiling, asphalt streets melting and flowing like molten lava, glass windows liquefying, metal lamp posts bending and twisting from the intense heat. Fire department communications collapsed completely as telephone lines burned away. Tail gunner Sergeant James C.R., looking down from the belly of a B-29, reported that his guns were unnecessary. Japanese fighters couldn't operate in the superheated, turbulent air over the city. Anti-aircraft guns fell silent as their crews fled the advancing inferno, abandoning their posts to save their own lives or those of their families. The greatest enemy for the air crews was now the turbulence from the thermal columns, which could flip a 60-ton bomber like a leaf in a hurricane. Pilots reported that they could smell burning flesh at 5,000 feet altitude. The devastation metrics exceeded all projections. 171 buildings were eliminated. 1.8 million people were rendered homeless. The official death toll was 83,793, but actual casualties likely exceeded 100,000. More people died in 6 hours than in any single military action in human history. A grim statistic that even surpassed the atomic bombings that would follow 5 months later. 1/4 of Tokyo ceased to exist in a single night. Let me try to paint a more intimate picture of this horror, to ground the statistics in the human experience. Imagine the Tanaka family. Kenji, a skilled craftsman who assembled intricate electrical systems for aircraft in his small workshop behind his wooden house in Asakusa. His wife, Akiko, and their 2 young children, Ren and Hana. They had dutifully followed the instructions. When the sirens wailed, they would rush to a designated spot in their narrow street, armed with buckets and sand, ready to fight fires. But nothing in their lives, nothing in their collective memory, could have prepared them for this. When the first incendiaries struck, it wasn't the concussion of high explosives, but a strange, sizzling rain. Then came the smell, a chemical, burning scent, followed by an immediate, terrifying blossoming of flames. Kenji grabbed his family, pushing them towards the designated assembly point, but the street was already a raging inferno. Houses, mere inches apart, ignited almost simultaneously, transforming the tightly packed neighborhood into a roaring furnace. The narrow alleyways, meant for foot traffic and small carts, became inescapable traps. Akiko clutched Hana, her face streaked with soot and tears, as Ren coughed violently from the thick, acrid smoke. They tried to run, but the asphalt beneath their feet was melting, becoming a sticky, burning tar that clung to their shoes. The air was no longer breathable, hot enough to sear their lungs. The wind, now a supernatural gale, tore at their clothes, carrying embers and flaming debris, sucking the very oxygen from their desperate breaths. They saw neighbors consumed by flame, their screams swallowed by the roar of the firestorm. The canals, once their only hope of escape, were boiling, filled with the charred remains of those who had sought refuge in their waters. Kenji, a man who had built his life with his hands, found himself utterly helpless, his skills useless against an enemy that consumed everything in its path. This was not war. It was annihilation, a primal, all-consuming force that respected no boundaries, no age, no innocence. The Tanaka family, like so many others, simply vanished into the superheated air, their story a silent testament to the unimaginable suffering inflicted that night. The Japanese output statistics told the story in stark numerical terms. Aircraft engine assembly in the Tokyo district was reduced by 75% overnight. Precision tool operations were eliminated entirely in affected areas. Electronic component fabrication lost 12 major suppliers completely. Ball bearing facilities, critical for all rotating machinery, saw 40% of their national capability wiped out. The cascade effects ripped through entire supply chains as component suppliers vanished in flames. On March 11th, reconnaissance aircraft photographed the aftermath. Where dense urban manufacturing districts had existed 48 hours earlier, only ash fields remained. 16 square miles of scorched earth, punctuated by occasional concrete structures that had survived the inferno. Factory chimneys stood like grave markers over incinerated facilities. Rail yards twisted into abstract sculptures of melted steel. The psychological impact exceeded even the physical damage. Worker absenteeism skyrocketed as survivors, traumatized and grief-stricken, searched desperately for missing family members. Factory managers reported efficiency drops of 60% among workers who were simply too shell-shocked to function. Military schedules became meaningless as entire supplier networks ceased to exist. The myth of the divine wind, the kamikaze that had historically protected Japan from foreign invasion, evaporated like morning mist, replaced by a profound sense of vulnerability. Intelligence intercepts revealed growing panic within Japanese command structures. Navy Ministry reports described a complete breakdown of coordination. Army procurement officers reported catastrophic disruption of component delivery schedules. Munitions Ministry statistics showed irretrievable losses to precision capabilities. The distributed system, ironically designed to protect against precision bombing, proved fatally vulnerable to area incendiary attack. It was a strategic miscalculation with devastating consequences. LeMay, ever the pragmatic strategist, wasted no time. While Tokyo still smoldered, he ordered the second wave. On March 11th, 285 B-29s struck Nagoya, Japan's aircraft manufacturing center. The Mitsubishi Aircraft Works, which had dispersed its operations among 300 subcontractors throughout the city, saw them eliminated simultaneously in another firestorm. 2 square miles of manufacturing district vaporized, and aircraft assembly dropped 40% in just 24 hours. March 13th brought devastation to Osaka, Japan's second-largest city. 274 superfortresses dropped 1,133 tons of incendiaries. The Osaka arsenal, responsible for producing 1/5 of Japan's ammunition, ceased to exist. 8 square miles of commercial districts were reduced to ash. 134,144 buildings eliminated. Port facilities, which handled 30% of Japan's imports, burned to the waterline. The sheer scale was relentless. March 16th witnessed Kobe's annihilation. 331 B-29s transformed Japan's 6th largest city into an inferno. The Kawasaki shipyards, which built 1/3 of Japan's merchant vessels, burned for 3 days. The Mitsubishi and Kawanishi aircraft plants lost 60% of their capability. 7 square miles of urban area were eliminated. The transportation networks that connected western Japan to Tokyo were severed completely. The initial 5-day campaign concluded on March 19th with a return to Nagoya. 290 superfortresses finished what the first raid had started. The Aichi Aircraft Company, a key producer of naval attack aircraft, lost every one of its dispersed facilities simultaneously. Residential districts housing skilled workers vaporized, and technical schools training aircraft mechanics were incinerated. 3 additional square miles of capability were removed from Japan's war economy. The statistics were irrefutable, painting a picture of systematic economic and societal collapse. In just 10 days, B-29s had dropped 9,373 tons of incendiaries on Japanese cities. 42 square miles of urban area had been obliterated. 1.5 million people were homeless. Output indices collapsed. Aircraft manufacturing was down 68%. Munitions assembly down 50%. Machine tool operations down 72%. The cascade failure of interdependent networks created an economic paralysis that had been unthinkable just weeks before. But LeMay was just beginning. Simultaneously with the firebombing campaign, Operation Starvation was launched. B-29s from the 313th Bombardment Wing began dropping naval mines in Japanese waters. These M25 mines, equipped with magnetic and acoustic sensors, made sweeping nearly impossible. Eventually, 12,000 mines would close every major Japanese port. Import tonnage, which had already fallen 90% due to submarine warfare, dropped to virtually zero. Raw material shortages became critical within days. Steel, essential for weapons and infrastructure, required iron ore from Manchuria and Korea. No ships meant no ore meant no steel. No steel meant no weapons. Aluminum depended on bauxite from the southern resource area, now completely cut off. Aviation fuel required crude oil from the Dutch East Indies, pipelines severed. Food imports, crucial for feeding workers, terminated. The Japanese economy began consuming itself, starved of the very resources that sustained it. The campaign expanded relentlessly through the spring. On April 13th, 327 B-29s returned to Tokyo, obliterating the Arsenal District. April 15th saw 109 Superfortresses eliminate Kawasaki's engine plants. May 14th brought 472 bombers to Nagoya in the largest daylight incendiary raid of the war. The systematic erasure of Japanese capabilities proceeded with a chilling mechanical efficiency. By May 25th, even secondary cities faced annihilation. Yokohama lost 9 square miles and 42% of its urban area in a single night. Tokyo was struck again, with an additional 16.8 square miles incinerated. The capital city that had once housed 7 million people was now 50% rubble. Output from the Tokyo-Yokohama complex, which had produced 35% of Japan's war material, effectively ceased to exist. The human toll mounted beyond comprehension. Each raid produced tens of thousands of casualties. Burn victims overwhelmed medical facilities that lacked even basic supplies. Malnutrition spread rapidly as food distribution networks collapsed. Disease followed as sanitation systems failed. The skilled workers essential to precision operations, men who required years of training and experience, died by the thousands. Their loss represented knowledge that could not be replaced, a severe blow to Japan's ability to rebuild its sophisticated industries. By August 1945, systematic annihilation had become routine. LeMay's target list had expanded to include every city with a population exceeding 30,000. 66 Japanese cities had been firebombed. 180 square miles of urban area obliterated. 21 million Japanese displaced from their homes. The very foundation that had supported the world's third-largest navy and an army of 5 million had been reduced to smoking ruins. Manufacturing statistics revealed complete economic collapse. Aircraft assembly, which had peaked at 2,172 planes in September 1944, plummeted to 131 by July 1945. Engine fabrication dropped 75%. Propeller manufacturing was down 80%. Electronic components were virtually eliminated. The feedback loops accelerated geometrically. No ball bearings meant no engines. No engines meant no aircraft. No aircraft meant no defense against the B-29s that arrived nightly with mechanical precision. The final statistics defied belief. Total bomb tonnage dropped 147,000 tons. Total sorties flown 15,000. Total B-29s lost 414. Total American aircrew casualties approximately 2,600. Against these losses, Japanese casualties from strategic bombing ranged from 400,000 to 600,000 dead, with millions more injured or displaced. Tokyo alone lost more civilians in one night than Britain lost in the entire war. The numbers are staggering, a chilling testament to the efficiency of this new, brutal form of warfare. Prince Fumimaro Konoe's post-war testimony to American investigators was explicit. Fundamentally, the thing that brought about the determination to make peace was the prolonged bombing by the B-29s. Navy Minister Admiral Mitsumasa Yonai concurred, stating, "The B-29 was the most important single factor in causing Japan to surrender." The United States Strategic Bombing Survey, conducted after the war, concluded that Japan would have surrendered by November 1945, even without invasion and without the atomic bombs, based solely on conventional bombing and blockade. This wasn't a matter of if, but when. The technological implications of this campaign revolutionized warfare. Strategic bombing had, for the first time, validated itself as a war-winning capability. The ability to eliminate entire economies from the air removed the immediate strategic necessity for ground invasion. The independent Air Force that General Arnold had envisioned became a reality in 1947, built on the foundation of the B-29's success over Japan. Every subsequent air campaign, from the Korean War to Vietnam, Kosovo, Iraq, and Afghanistan, would reference the lessons of 1945, witnessing attempts to replicate its success. The promise and limitations of strategic bombing continued to influence military planning 8 decades later. Boeing manufactured 3,170 B-29s between 1943 and 1946. Each aircraft cost $639,188, equivalent to roughly $11 million in modern currency. The total program investment of $3.7 billion, while exceeding the Manhattan Project's $2 billion, yielded a conclusive return on investment. Japan's entire industrial and economic foundation was obliterated for the loss of 414 B-29s and 2,600 aircrew. The arithmetic of strategic warfare had been solved, creating a new, terrible equation for future conflicts. Yet, this chilling efficiency also generated decades of profound moral debate. International law in 1945 did not explicitly prohibit the area bombing of cities. The Hague Conventions addressed military targets, but largely overlooked the targeting of civilian workers. American planners argued that eliminating war capabilities justified civilian casualties, especially given Japan's deliberate dispersal of military assembly into civilian areas, which made discrimination between military and civilian targets virtually impossible. Critics, however, condemned the deliberate targeting of population centers as war crimes. General LeMay remained unapologetic throughout his life. His logic was coldly practical, brutal in its simplicity. We are at war with Japan. We were attacked by Japan. Do you want to kill Japanese, or would you rather have Americans killed? He pointed to the projections for Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan, which anticipated 1 million American casualties. Operation Olympic, the invasion of Kyushu, scheduled for November 1945, alone expected 250,000 casualties in the first 30 days. Operation Coronet, the assault on Honshu, planned for March 1946, expected even higher losses. Captured Japanese planning documents, part of Operation Ketsugo, revealed a defense plan that mobilized every Japanese citizen for resistance. 28 million civilians had been organized into combat units, bamboo spears distributed to women and children, suicide attack training for entire populations. The National Resistance Program anticipated 20 million Japanese deaths defending the homeland. Against these projections, the bombing casualties, while horrific, represented a fraction of the invasion costs. Robert McNamara, who analyzed bombing effectiveness for LeMay, later served as Secretary of Defense during the Vietnam War. In his 2003 documentary, The Fog of War, he reflected on the firebombing campaign. LeMay said, if we'd lost the war, we'd all have been prosecuted as war criminals. And I think he's right. He and I'd say I were behaving as war criminals. The moral questions raised by the campaign against Japanese cities continue to resonate in debates about civilian casualties, proportionality, and the very definition of humanity in warfare. When does a military necessity cross the line into an unacceptable atrocity? The line, as history has shown, is often drawn in the ashes. The transformation of Japan was irreversible. Its vertically integrated zaibatsu conglomerates had been shattered. The distributed system that characterized Japanese operations was obliterated. Post-war reconstruction would require a complete reimagination of organizational structure. It's from these ashes that the Toyota production system and just-in-time manufacturing, concepts that would revolutionize global commerce decades later, first emerged. Technical innovation, accelerated by the exigencies of war, also continued beyond prediction. Radar navigation guided Pathfinder aircraft to targets through complete darkness. Incendiary chemistry created unstoppable conflagrations. Operations research optimized bombing patterns. Command and control systems coordinated hundreds of aircraft across thousands of miles. Electronic warfare jammed Japanese radar and communications. Every aspect of modern air warfare can trace its origins to innovations forged in the crucible of conflict over Japan. The psychological transformation proved equally profound. The Japanese concept of Yamato Damashi, the unconquerable Japanese spirit, had been broken by technology. The divine winds that repelled Mongol invasion fleets centuries ago could not stop the B-29s. The warrior tradition that valued death before dishonor meant nothing against incendiary bombs. The might that had conquered East Asia was reduced to ash in 5 months. The recognition of defeat became undeniable, a stark and brutal reckoning with a new reality. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, Chief of Naval General Staff, testified, "I believe the Russian participation in the war against Japan, rather than the atom bombs, did more to hasten the surrender." But his own staff reports contradicted this claim. Naval intelligence assessments from July 1945 stated, "The enemy's bombardment is rapidly achieving its objective of eliminating our homeland's capability. Continuation of the war has become impossible. Japanese recovery required 2 decades, propelled by the crucial reconstruction demand of the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. American occupation authorities, who had overseen the annihilation, now supervised the rebuilding. The same districts incinerated in 1945 became centers of an economic miracle by 1965. Toyota City rose from Nagoya's ashes. Electronics giants emerged from Tokyo's burned districts. The world's second-largest economy grew from history's most complete annihilation, a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. Curtis LeMay was promoted to lieutenant general 2 weeks after Japan's surrender. His subsequent command of Strategic Air Command, SAC, from 1948 to 1957, shaped American nuclear strategy throughout the Cold War. The same calculated logic that determined incendiary loads over Tokyo later determined the nuclear targeting of Soviet cities. Mutual assured destruction, a doctrine that would define Cold War strategy, descended directly from Operation Meeting House's precedent. The last B-29 combat mission flew on August 14, 1945, just hours before Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. 143 Superfortresses struck the Nippon Oil Company refinery at Tsuchiaki. As the bombers returned to base, radio operators received the ceasefire order. The strategic bombing campaign that had reduced Japanese capabilities by 70% was complete. The final equation was conclusive. 147,000 tons of bombs dropped, 66 cities obliterated, an economy eliminated. In the depths of Tokyo Bay, the battleship Nagato rested on the harbor bottom, sunk by American carrier aircraft. Once the pride of the Imperial Navy, her massive guns that could hurl three 200-pound shells 25 miles had proved worthless against bombers flying from islands 1,500 miles away. The age of the battleship had ended. The era of strategic air power had begun. Economies could be eliminated from the air. Curtis LeMay and his B-29s had proved it with calculated certainty over the burning cities of Japan. The bamboo spears distributed to Japanese civilians for homeland defense were never used. They rest today in museums, silent relics of a war that ended not through invasion, but through the systematic aerial elimination of capabilities. The B-29 had not just obliterated Japanese facilities. It had demonstrated that modern war belonged to the nation with superior technology, assets, and the strategic logic to employ them effectively. In the ashes of 66 Japanese cities, the foundation of the modern world order was established, built on a chilling premise. The ability to inflict such widespread destruction that the will to fight, and the means to fight, simply ceased to exist. The enduring lesson. The story of the B-29 firebombing of Japan is not just a chapter in military history. It's a stark, visceral lesson in the terrible calculus of war, the profound implications of technological advancement, and the enduring moral ambiguities that haunt human conflict. It reveals how strategic necessity can redefine what is considered acceptable, pushing the boundaries of warfare into previously unimaginable realms of destruction. We learn that technological superiority, when coupled with an unyielding strategic logic, can be a decisive force, capable of rewriting the rules of engagement and dictating the terms of peace. The B-29 campaign was a brutal testament to the destructive power of concentrated air power, proving that the battlefield could extend far beyond the front lines, encompassing entire nations and their populations. But the most potent lesson lies in the human cost and the moral quagmire it created. The question of targeting civilians, even when they are part of a dispersed war machine, remains one of the most contentious debates in military ethics. LeMay's cold practicality, contrasted with McNamara's later regrets, forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that in the desperate exigencies of war, the line between military necessity and moral transgression can become tragically blurred. It compels us to ask, what price is too high for victory? And who bears the burden of accountability for the unimaginable suffering inflicted in the name of strategic objectives? Finally, the ashes of 1945 also hold a lesson in resilience. From the total annihilation of its industrial base, Japan rose, not merely to rebuild, but to innovate, to redefine its economic future, and to emerge as a global leader. This enduring spirit, forged in the crucible of unparalleled destruction, reminds us of humanity's extraordinary capacity for recovery, adaptation, and transformation, even in the face of the most profound devastation. The cities burned, but the human spirit, though scarred, ultimately found a way to rise again, carrying with it the indelible lessons of a war that changed everything.